The sound of the drop of blood hitting the rest of the liquid in the big jar filled his ears and made sweat break out on his skin. Well, as much as he could still sweat, Caleb thought with a tired grin, as he sank back on the wooden chair and took a deep and long breath. It wasn't as painful anymore. Not really, no. Had he grown accustomed to the sensation? Hardly. Rather, it was just part of what his life now had become. The world itself seemed duller somehow, as were his own emotions and sensations. But it was all part of the plan. Something he had been warned about in advance, something he had known would be coming. The fog. Caleb slowly stood up from his chair and lumbered across the dark room and toward the covered-up window. He could feel a cold breeze blowing in through the cracks, but even that sensation seemed far duller and less important than before. Was it really worth it? Well, he had pondered that question for days already, and still thought that it would be. At least in the end. For now, he just needed to bear the suffering a bit more. Maybe squeeze out another few drops after midnight. Then sit back and wait. It wasn't like anyone could stop what was about to befall the town anyway, and all the others seemed either unwilling to see it or busy getting ready in their own ways. Caleb pushed open the window cover and looked outside for the first time that day. The sun was setting already, and the world seemed grey and devoid of life. He couldn't even pretend to smile anymore. The scrolls he had studied had told him that it would come to this. A loss of emotion, of vitae, it had been called. He looked back at the big jar standing next to the chair. It was almost full, and the smell it gave off made Caleb queasy somehow. This was his life in there, he knew, his essence, his being. So, if that was him, what was still walking around? A ghoul? He had read the description in the scrolls and wanted to scoff. Normally, people like his master used this ritual to bind a dead and soulless worker to themselves. But he wasn't like that. No. It might be the first time ever someone had tried it on themselves, if he thought about it. Because who would voluntarily give up their essence like that? Well, he would, and there was a good reason for it too. The fog would be coming tomorrow. A curse, a prophecy, an inevitability. He heard his master's voice again in his mind. Things are hiding in this fog. Things neither you nor anyone else in town has ever seen before. It's a calamity. They are hungry, and they are coming. Caleb shook his head and watched the sun slowly move toward the horizon. From this window, he could see the whole town. Many of the buildings were empty. Some because people had fled. They wouldn't escape the fog like that. Instead, all they had done by running away was spread the calamity. Something like that wasn't easy to shake off. No, they had to stay and face it to truly put it behind them, and Caleb could see the other people of the town still working on their own plans. Some seemed eager to fight. Others preferred to hide. At least 3 houses had pretty much been linked, with barricades in front of all the entrances and big metal bars barring the windows. He didn't like their chances. After what Master had told him about the things in the fog, he didn't like anyone's chances, to be honest. But his own should still be the best, at least according to himself. Caleb tried to chuckle, but failed miserably. Master would be incensed if she could see him right now. He wasn't sure if he liked what he saw as he looked down at his arms and body. His skin was grey and sunken in, riddled with blotchy spots. 2 of his fingernails were already missing, and there was this sickly stench in the air every time he moved around. Yeah, he really was turning himself into a ghoul. And for what? To escape the things that were coming here and would ravage anything alive. He shook his head. Maybe he could have gone about it all in a different way. With a bit more time, he could have looked through his master's library in peace. But there hadn't been enough time. Just a single week. Caleb reached out and touched a spot on his neck where the mark had appeared 6 days ago now. It was the only part of his body that still seemed to radiate any kind of heat. A sickly fever, one of the townsfolk had called it. Yeah. Only on his body, it felt more like a slight warmth by now. It wasn't like he produced any heat on his own in his current state. A sudden chill gripped him as he looked up and out the window again, at the houses in town. There were people atop one of the roofs, barricading the edges. They would try to wait it out as high up as they could. Maybe they would be lucky and survive. Caleb doubted it, but he still hoped they would. The people of this town had never treated his master or him with anything but respect, and he still felt guilty about not being able to help them more. But his master had left half a month ago and would return sometime in the future. Would she find the town empty and abandoned? Her tower, the one where he was staying, demolished and destroyed? No. He was still here, and as long as he could move, he would make sure this place would stay. Because she had told him to keep an eye on the town and the tower, and her orders were absolute. Would he even survive to fulfill her command? He felt this pang of fear, and the sensation made him almost stumble. The sun was setting outside. Maybe for the last time, part of his mind warned him, and Caleb felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. They would all fight for their lives, he knew. Only his own battle would start a little bit earlier. The sun disappeared, and the world and town were plunged into darkness. He could still see 2 torches between some houses, lit and burning as if they were alive themselves, while the rest of the buildings slowly vanished in the upcoming night. Caleb closed his own eyes for a moment and found that he could already feel it. Strange tension permeated the air, together with the sensation of being watched. That was the price he had to pay for his way of surviving the fog. In essence, he had pretty much killed himself, even if only temporarily. And now, those things in the darkness were coming after him. He shivered without feeling the cold. Normally, a ghoul had no soul. They were dead bodies reanimated to work for a necromancer. But he was different. His own essence was still intact, hidden inside, and he already knew that he would look like a lighthouse to the things that hunted during the night. A breeze blew through the tower, making the torches flicker and the doors groan. Something was already here, It was coming for him. He could feel it. And yet, there wasn't much he could do except stay calm and follow his master's teachings. Caleb closed the window cover again and walked briskly over to the next torch. It was strange, standing so close to a source of fire, but feeling neither warmth nor comfort. Well, everything felt strange, if he was honest. Moving his body was a challenge, since he couldn't feel much of anything anymore. He could neither eat nor drink, couldn't sleep or dream. And every so often, he felt his soul getting pulled away from his body, which was something he had to shut down immediately. If the connection was cut, there was no way of regaining his body once more. All his master would find in this tower then would be a ghoul, mindlessly standing around waiting for commands. Caleb felt like he should be shivering, but his body stayed completely still. He could hear another breeze blowing past the tower, and this time he could clearly feel something inside of it. A presence, suddenly changing direction and focusing on this building. On the floor below, the wooden boards creaked, and Caleb knew that one of the things was slowly making its way toward him. His master had taught him a few tricks, of course, wards against evil spirits and the like, but he couldn't very well use them right now. He had no idea if his own soul wouldn't be repelled by something like it, which would lead to his immediate demise. Caleb closed his eyes for a moment, heard the torch close by flickering, and felt a breeze brushing past his skin. Eyes were upon him, not just two, but many. He could feel it so clearly now, as if another person was standing right in front of him. Slowly and calmly, he opened his eyes again, but kept his gaze lowered. He really wasn't alone anymore. In front of him, he could see something dark and whirling, shifting like smoke. It formed the hem of a dress, and Caleb couldn't help but take a step back. He knew that figure, the feet that looked out from under the dress. He had spent years with her, so how could he not recognize even a single part of her body? His master, the witch of the tower. Caleb felt anger building inside his chest, where his heart should be beating, but didn't anymore. It wasn't his master. Whatever had come here for him was just taking her form, but the sight still rattled him.
Don't look at them,
he heard the voice of his master in his mind. It had been one of the lessons she had personally overseen. Acknowledging them gave them a reason to stay. Fearing them strengthened their power. Looking in their eyes formed a connection. Yet, despite knowing it, he could feel his gaze slowly moving up. The black, swirling dress around her knees looked like silk. His master had never worn anything like it, but it would have fit her perfectly, Caleb thought, then suddenly stopped himself in his tracks. He could already see one of the hands of this thing pointing at him. What was he doing here? Was he that weak that something as simple as a spirit taking his master's form could shake his resolve? No, at least he hadn't thought it could. But he missed her. Especially today. She would have shown him another way to survive the coming catastrophe. One that didn't involve turning himself into a ghoul. She would have known how to save the people of the town as well. How many of them had turned up at the door of the tower these past 6 days? Dozens. And yet, He had sent them away with half-baked promises and almost useless tips and tricks. He wasn't worthy of taking care of anything at all. Neither could he lead them, nor protect them. He hadn't even managed to reassure them. Would she even want to return to him, the way he was fucking it all up? Caleb could feel his own hand trembling at the thought, then noticed that his gaze was still rising. It was calling out to him, this thing. He knew it, felt it, yet felt powerless in its presence. What would it feel like to die? Would it devour his soul and leave behind his now reanimated body? Or would it be peaceful? Whatever happened, he wouldn't have to watch the people in town dying or see his master's disappointed face. Maybe it would be easier to simply give in. No, a voice suddenly cut through his thoughts and made his body stop. This thing that had come here wasn't doing him any favors. It didn't want to help. Getting his soul torn out of his body would mean his death. He would never get to see his master again. His eyes were focused on her throat. Something was wrong with the skin there. It looked off. Caleb slowly shook his head. The night had just started, and he was already tempted. What would his master say if she could see him now? She would be furious. The eyes of the thing were burrowing into him as he slowly turned his head and made it a point to look away. As soon as the sun came up, the fog would follow, and inside of it, monsters would be moving. Real ones. This here, the spirits and apparitions haunting him, was nothing but a small preamble. They wanted his soul, yes, but he had already expected that. What he should be doing right now is taking care of his body so that the real threat won't tear him apart. Caleb walked through the apparition without looking up and toward the chair standing by the jar filled with blood. He still had things to do to get his body ready. Sitting down, he could feel the eyes of the spirit following him. It wouldn't give up that easily, Caleb knew, but if he managed to concentrate on other things, it would hopefully leave him be. He pulled up the sleeve of his shirt and grabbed a knife with his other hand, still feeling amazed at how calm he now was. There was no pain. Not anymore. But what he needed to do now was get the rest of the blood out of his body. He pressed the tip of the blade into one of the blotchy spots in his skin and watched the metal cut into the flesh. Once he turned himself back, he would feel it all, he warned himself. But right now, it was more important to quickly and cleanly exsanguinate his own body. Normally, since one did this process to another and not himself, it was easiest to simply string up a corpse and open its main arteries. But he could hardly do that to himself. No, he had to open spot after spot wherever blood pooled inside himself and drain each and every part with another tiny cut. He put his arm above the jar and turned it, watching the drops running up the blade, then dripping into the almost filled vessel. A strange shiver ran through his body, and only in the periphery of his eyes did Caleb see the feet still looking like his master's. But he didn't care anymore. She wasn't here and wouldn't come to save him. It was on him to survive, and looking at the apparition didn't help in that regard at all. With a gurgling groan, he watched the last drop disappear in the red liquid, then pulled up the sleeve even further and found the next spot. Every time he pricked his skin, a few drops would come out, run down the blade, and drip into the jar. Slowly but methodically, Caleb worked around his body. Cut, drip, cut, drip. His hand holding the knife stayed completely steady. A sign of how little real life was left in him. He would be able to undo it all later. Caleb felt a shiver running through him at the thought. Part of him wasn't so sure. He shook his head again to clear his mind. It didn't matter right now, he told himself. First, he had to survive the next day. Then he could worry about his current condition. He pulled up his leg and cut along the inside of his knee, finding another 3 drops of blood that spilled into the jar. How far would he need to go? The things in the fog were dangerous, yes. But if they only hunted for living beings, wouldn't it be enough already? Caleb could feel his soul straining with every drop of blood he now shed. If he removed every last bit of life from his body, would he still be himself? Maybe his soul would leave then as well. The doubts kept clouding his mind. No one had done what he was doing right now before him. Or at least no one had survived to tell the tale. It was a dumb idea, but he was already committed. Caleb tried to stop concentrating on it and instead allowed himself a few seconds of rest. Even without raising his eyes, he could feel them in this room now. Not just the one thing that was still imitating his master, but more. Some were bigger, some smaller, but all of them were here for only one reason. Him. They were surrounding him. What would happen if his soul left his body at this moment? Would they tear each other apart to get to him first, like some of the fish around the area? Well, he wouldn't be able to see it, he reminded himself, and picked up the knife again. The glass jar at his feet was slowly filling up completely. Inside, the blood was coagulating, which meant that the ritual had worked as well. At least he hadn't run into any unsolvable problems yet, Caleb thought as the knife pricked one of his fingers to draw out a single drop of blood. His skin was now almost completely grey. He really did look like a corpse, he found, as he looked his body up and down. Only a few drops were missing, but he couldn't see them pooling close to the skin. Were they hidden in his heart? Caleb felt a chill in his mind, turned the knife in front of his chest, but then stopped. Something was strange, off. It felt wrong somehow. He could see the tip of the knife pointing right at his heart, shaking slightly. His hand was calm and steady, far more than any time before he had turned himself. Yet somehow the blade was trembling. Caleb stopped trying to move and concentrated on his surroundings. The things watching him were shaking as well. It looked like an earthquake, but the ground didn't move. A bead of sweat ran down the side of his face. That shouldn't be possible. He wasn't breathing. His heart wasn't beating. Sweating was something only living things did. Caleb felt a pang of pain in his chest. The trembling figures around him started to disappear. Like smoke, they dispersed. And now, he finally understood what was happening. Something else had come here, and his body, his very essence, was scared. The light of the torch on his back wasn't flickering, but it was getting dimmer. Caleb put down the knife and slowly turned his head. A shadow was standing behind him, staring down. For the first time since changing, Caleb felt cold. This thing was bad news. His legs were trembling. A hand touched his shoulder, and Caleb felt his body shaking. This thing, it was so much worse than the others. It wouldn't be playing around. It could touch him. In all likelihood, it would tear out his soul. Caleb felt the hand on his shoulder pressing down on him. Then more hands grabbing him around his neck. He tried to shift his body, but the thing increased the pressure until he felt his bones slowly bending. What the hell had found him? Where had this thing come from? Something cold and wet touched the back of his head, and Caleb felt it burrowing into his mind. Every instinct inside him screeched in unison to get up and run. That this thing would tear him apart. He tried, then stopped as suddenly the worst pain he had ever felt flooded his consciousness. Red flashes of light appeared in front of his eyes. Caleb opened his mouth to scream, but instead of a shout, only a gargling noise came out. Something was touching him, deep inside his head and mind. Poking and prodding, and every time it moved, it felt like his body was set on fire again. Another growl came out of his mouth. This thing would kill him. He could feel it already reaching out for his soul. Caleb felt as if he was getting hit by lightning. His body was shaking, trembling, and jerking around. Hands were holding him, pressing down on him. He could feel his collarbones aching and bending. The thing touched his soul, and for a moment, the whole world turned black. All he felt was this insatiable hunger coming from the thing holding him. It wanted him, needed him. He would taste so good. Caleb growled and pressed down. The chair beneath him ached, then broke, and suddenly the hands that had held him disappeared. In a split second, he rolled over, away from the thing. Its hunger still permeated the air. A hand touched his shoulder, but this time, Caleb didn't hesitate. Jumping up to his feet, he growled again, then felt the shirt rip apart as unseen fingers tried to hold him back. He wouldn't reach the stairs, he knew. This thing would catch him in another second. It would hold him down and tear his soul apart. Red flashes filled his vision as he shot forward. Out! The voice of his master echoed through his mind. Caleb looked up and could see the covered window. There was no time. He felt the hunger following him. Uncountable eyes stared at him with pure greed and gluttony. A hand touched his arm, but he ripped it away, losing a part of his skin. Caleb stopped thinking and jumped. He saw his body breaking through the covers of the window, heard the wind blowing past his ears, and then felt gravity pulling at him. The room he had been in was high up, far too high for a normal person to make such a jump, but he didn't care. Something like that wouldn't kill him, he promised himself. Not in his current condition. The walls of the tower rushed by him as he pulled in his arms and legs. Finally, the hungry stares following him disappeared, and the next moment, Caleb hit the ground. The impact shook him to his core. He felt bones breaking throughout his body, but no pain. Rolling over, he got back to his feet and immediately started to run. From up in the window of the tower, countless eyes still stared at him with unabashed greed. Caleb knew this thing wouldn't give up that easily. He needed to run, to find a place to hide, if that was even possible. He turned away from the forest behind the tower and ran toward the town. Living people wouldn't be in danger from this thing. At least, that was what he hoped. Maybe their presence would confuse it enough to let go. He could hear a rumbling in his back as the monster barreled out of the tower, incensed that he had dared to run away. Caleb could feel it. The anger and hunger of this thing. The shadows seemed to fall on him, dimming the light of the moon. Caleb looked up, just for a moment, but what he saw made his legs move even faster. A giant, bat-like cloud of black shadows was flying from the tower, with eyes everywhere that seemed to burrow into him. He needed to reach the town. Caleb was glad he had only broken bones in his upper body. One of his ribs was sticking out of his chest. His left arm was broken in many places up to his shoulder, and he could feel his collarbone shifting with every step. But he could still run. He raced toward the 2 torches still burning in the town. Would the normal people be able to see the thing following him? He wasn't sure, and he didn't really want them to. This here was his fight. They had other things to worry about. The fog that would be coming. Caleb reached the mud road that was leading out of town, and suddenly felt a cold chill. The thing above gave off a sound he had never heard before. It screeched, and the shadow that had followed him got darker as it swooped down from the air and toward him. Caleb got lucky. He stumbled from the shock, fell, and rolled just as the hands in the mass of shadows stretched out to reach him, but missed him by a hair. Mud was splashing up around him as he got to his feet the next instant and ran toward the houses. In his mind, he was begging the thing to give up, but he knew it wouldn't be that easy. He could already see it rising again, getting ready to swoop down once more. Caleb reached the first house, dove into its shadow, and kept running. The feeling of eyes watching him disappeared for a moment, but only that long. Caleb dove out of the shadow and saw the thing still high in the sky, looking back at him. It seemed like it had come straight out of a nightmare. He needed to hide, but knew it would come after him. If he dove into one of the buildings, it would soon find him, and this time, there wouldn't be a way out. Caleb tried to scream, but his vocal cords had long since stopped working. He looked around and jumped right at the door of one of the abandoned houses. The entrance broke immediately, and as the thing in the sky let out another screech, he disappeared into the shadows. It would come after him, he knew, but he didn't care. In the back, he could see another door. This wasn't meant as a hiding spot, but a diversion. Caleb raced on and out the door just as he heard the thing landing by the entrance. How long could he survive? That was the real question. This monster wouldn't let go, wouldn't stop no matter what he did. He reached one of the dirt roads as he heard another inhuman screech coming from inside the house. Caleb ducked and raced along the street. Almost all the buildings here were abandoned. He jumped into the next one before the monster could reach the road outside and ran out the back again. Maybe it could smell him or feel him. In that case, it would be madness to stop inside one of the houses. No, he had to stay on his feet, at least for a little while. Caleb heard the beast screaming far behind, but didn't dare hope that it would give up so soon. He had felt its hunger before. It would definitely come for him again. After running through 3 more homes and staying away from the open road, he finally dared extend his arm and pull himself quickly behind a corner, hidden by a shed. Here, he could still flee if this thing found him, but he wouldn't be easily spotted. Caleb felt it and heard it. The monster was out there, above the town, looking for a sign of him with its uncountable eyes. He let his body sink back and touch the wall. He was still trembling. His mind felt rough and bruised. How long before it would stop? Caleb felt tired, which shouldn't happen at all. Was it because this thing had done something to him? He blinked and watched the world get blurry. It was hard staying on his feet. Ghouls shouldn't feel tired, he thought. And yet, as he closed his eyes, he felt the world shifting beneath him. Caleb opened his eyelids as something touched his shoulder. He didn't need to look around to know what it was. The strength of the hand made his broken collarbone ache as new splinters formed. Above him, the moon had shifted as well. How many hours had he lost? No, he didn't have time for this. Cold hands were holding him by the arms and shoulders, and he felt the gaze of the eyes right behind him. If his heart was still beating, it would have stopped right now, he thought. Something touched the back of his head, and Caleb started to thrash around. It didn't matter. The hands holding him were far too strong. It would eat him, tear away his soul. He tried to scream, but only a growl came out of his mouth. Where was Master? Why hadn't she come back? He needed her right now. They would never see each other again. Caleb felt the thing touch his soul, and the pain shot through him like lightning. It would rip him apart. He waited for the monster to finally grab hold of his soul. But it didn't. A moment passed, then another. He turned his head and looked back at the thing, but its eyes weren't on him anymore. No, it was looking downward. In the moonlight, the fog looked like white smoke. Almost liquid. Definitely ethereal. He could feel something from it as well. A coldness he hadn't experienced before. And the thing holding on to him seemed to think so as well. More and more fog was flowing in, covering the ground, and Caleb heard a bell sounding close by. The town's warning system. It was starting. A snarl reached his ears, and with a shriek, the thing in his back disappeared, as something walked leisurely through the incoming fog. Caleb couldn't see it clearly, only its shadow in the setting moon. But the feeling he got purely from looking at it made his body tremble. It was walking on 4 legs, like a dog or a wolf, but bigger. The fog kept flowing in, as if it were a liquid filling up a large bowl. Caleb felt like he couldn't move. The thing he had seen was disappearing in the smoke, but its presence still remained. If he tried to run, it would kill him, his instincts warned. The fog reached his head just as the first ray of sunshine appeared over the horizon, and Caleb felt something pushing past him. Next to him, the small shed broke apart as the massive body simply walked through it, and from behind him, screams started to come out of the village. His legs trembled, and he fell down. More and more things were walking through the fog, strolling along at an almost leisurely pace. Caleb felt the vibrations through the ground and knew why people called it a calamity. Not a single one of the townsfolk would survive, and there was nothing he could do. But the monster in the fog seemed to ignore him. From time to time, one of the things looked in his direction, and the feeling of being seen made his dead body sweat. But otherwise, they let him be. He heard houses breaking in the middle of the town, people screaming and shouting, the bell ringing in a last act of defiance. It was useless, he thought, as he lay there in the mud and didn't even dare to look up at the passing monsters. They were a calamity, and somehow they had found this place. Caleb felt the mark on his neck growing colder and colder, until suddenly the strange sensation disappeared. The fog dispersed as if it had been but a dream. But it hadn't been. Not at all. He looked up and could see the destruction. Sheds had been trampled, houses torn apart. There were footprints in the dirt. Some from paws, others with claws, and a few from giant human feet. There was a smell in the air, one he knew very well. Blood. Everyone had died here, he knew, but he couldn't even muster a single tear. Caleb shook his head and looked up. The sun had already risen to almost its zenith. In around 6 hours, darkness would fall again, and he knew that the other monster would return to get his soul. Before that happened, he needed to reverse his transformation, even with his body half broken.
No rest for the wicked,
Caleb said to himself, and started running back toward the tower.